Thank you to Straight Arrow News for sponsoring this video.
Do you know what you're having for dinner tonight? Sadly, for countless residents here in New York City, that answer is tough because they are struggling to even afford food. In fact, a new report shows that in the last 3 years, more people in our city are visiting their local food pantries.
So as New York increasingly becomes a city for the rich and the well-connected, it's increasingly less of a place average people can survive. And with people spending thousands of dollars on their rent, recent reports reveal increasing numbers of folks can no longer afford groceries, as out-of-control crime jacks up the prices on everyday items faster than inflation. And for some reason, nobody running this city seems to be doing anything about it.
Things are bad. Increasingly, people with jobs in New York City can't afford healthy food for their families. 1 in 3 New Yorkers has used a food pantry over the past 3 years.
Costs are going up. Costs go up in a store when they have to recover the loss that they don't make on the stolen goods. Think about that.
It's devastating because we want to be able to serve all of the families. We want to be able to give food to everyone.
Jasmine Bethencourt is one of the supervisors at Riseboro Food Pantry in Bushwick. She expresses deep concern about the current state of food insecurity at her pantry.
Even though people are making money, even though people may be employed in some capacity, that's still not enough to keep up with those rising costs, those hardships, and so they're still needing to turn to free food assistance to food pantries to meet those needs.
We've all seen the videos of people shoplifting, but just when you think you've seen it all, a trio on Long Island stealing ice cream, $640 worth of it.
Wow, ice cream. That just for ice cream is crazy.
That's pretty pathetic.
That's actually crazy. Out of all the things that they would take is ice cream.
And it was all caught on video.
So affordability in New York has reached a new low, with more full-time workers than ever relying on pantries. But what nobody's talking about is, even though we get stories like this at the end of the year, every year they're getting worse as the economy deteriorates. And the first signs of this were evident 1 year ago with the demise of New York City's community fridges, which had sprung up during 2020 and were maintained by generous locals who wanted to come together in a way our politicians cannot. But as rent and living costs here have exploded over the last few years, those fridges, which were once stocked with produce, are now pretty much empty, if they even still work at all. And sadly, instead of there being an excess of volunteers to help feed the less fortunate, there are now excess lines at food pantries all over town. And with New York having the third worst inflation of any city in America, food prices are hitting levels that are unaffordable for most people who have just paid their highest in the nation apartment rents, forcing many families to make unfortunate choices about what and when they'll eat, with some food banks reporting a 40% increase in visitors from 2021. Which brings us to the real reason why food shortages are now hitting New York. Yes, inflation is high everywhere, but here it's even higher than it should be because of our laws, which are making everything worse. And New York doesn't just have laws that make it expensive for businesses to operate in general, but we've also got laws that fail to punish criminals who steal things, with theft in New York State contributing to a $4.4 billion loss in economic activity, which causes the prices of what New Yorkers buy, even if it's at a grocery store or a bodega, to cost way more than it should. Plus, New York's congestion pricing scheme, which will tax traffic, kicks off in just a few weeks. And although this may pour needed money into our rotting public transit network, critics say it'll do it by adding fees to each delivery of vegetables at a local grocery store in the congestion zone. And as you're about to see, all of this combined is just going to lead to more food shortages at a time when our food pantries are already tapped out. So here we have one of New York's last surviving community fridges, but it's empty. And that's because it costs money and time to put stuff in a donation bin like this. And food pantries, they've got a similar problem. It costs money to give things to a food pantry, and it costs time to volunteer at one. Which creates a problem because as demand for assistance goes up, there are less people to help meet that demand at places that are supposed to help people.
We want to be able to give food to everyone.
Jasmine Bethencourt is one of the supervisors at Riseboro Food Pantry in Bushwick. She expresses deep concern about the current state of food insecurity at her pantry.
At this point, we're at capacity.
So here we got a local food pantry. They're seeing higher demand than they ever have before, and they're unable to meet the needs of all of their guests. Think of how depressing that is for the workers to just see more and more people coming in every single week, and to also be getting less help at the exact same time this is happening. It's terrible, and there should be red flags going off in the offices of the people that run New York about what a big problem this is. And think of how tough this is for people in a community that have been relying on a food pantry for a while and now can't get the same amount of help from it. And this isn't just a small handful of people we're talking about here. New York has 8 million residents. And according to this article, 1 million of them struggle with food insecurity. That's a lot of people. And we aren't just talking about homeless individuals here. Everyone is struggling. The middle class, working people. And if you think grocery prices are high where you live, you should go to a Whole Foods in New York. I saw milk that was over $9 a gallon. Yes, it was the organic, but still, that's a lot of money. The eggs, those were super expensive as well. On top of all of the other costs that people have here, this is just way too much.
The pantry serves over 400 families per week and has adapted to meet the diverse needs of the community, especially during the holidays. But despite their efforts, challenges persist.
One of the biggest challenges that we're facing.
So you heard it right there. More people are coming to places like pantries and little food banks like this because there's just not enough money to pay people's bills and buy their food here anymore. On top of that, these pantries, they've got the same problem as these community fridges. You need people to help run them. But if people are spending more time at work to take care of themselves or taking on second jobs or gig work, there will be less volunteers and there will be less donations. And this article from November of 2023 talks about how community fridges were starting to disappear. A great example of this is one of the fridges located near a boxing gym on Bleecker Street. This place was around for a long time, but then the business supporting it ended up shutting down, so the fridge went with it, and before it was closed, this particular community fridge was virtually empty most of the time. There just wasn't anything in it. And that's the same problem this fridge is having. There's nothing in here. The shelves are bare. It's very sad to see. And honestly, the only reason this is still here is because it is chained to the parking lot next to the community center. And to power it, there's a cord running through here, which goes behind this fence and plugs in. Without the community center, this place would be long gone. And I guess it doesn't matter if this place is here or not. If the fridge is empty, it's not doing any good. It's just sucking up electricity for no reason. And that is why a lot of community fridges have ended up shutting down. They fall into disrepair because they're outside, nobody puts anything in them, they just turn into a waste of money. And what's crazy is this is coming at a time when the city is disposing of food at its asylum shelters that is apparently so bad nobody can eat it, and they're wasting money doing this. And what that reveals is that the way to solve this isn't to have the government here buy food and prepare it and give it to people. They've proven that they're incapable of doing that.
Pantries are experiencing a notable rise in clients, particularly full-time working people. 1 in 3 adults and nearly half of families with children faced food hardship in 2023. Research analysts have...
That's an absolute disaster. 1 out of every 3 adults suffering with food insecurity. That's terrible. And that means that people don't have enough money in their pockets. That's a problem, and it's a problem the government here could solve if they really wanted to, but then they can't use that money to throw food in the trash, which they're doing in the name of compassion. But the study goes even further, revealing that almost half of families with kids are in the exact same situation, which makes sense. Families with kids have to rent larger apartments to house more people, and those extra people they live with, their kids, don't earn an income, which means their living costs are even higher, and surviving here is even more of a challenge than it is for somebody who's single and just has to take care of themselves. And look at this. Last year, rents grew over 8%, but incomes grew at just 1.2%. That's a massive gap between what people have to pay and what they can afford. But the problem here is that these are housing costs. Economic experts say that housing is an inflexible cost because you've got to pay your rent for your apartment every single month, and if you don't pay it, you're going to get kicked out. And they also say that food and nutrition are elastic expenses, which means you could change what you're eating. You could eat less of something. You could buy food at a different place if the place that you were going costs too much. And that's where people are making sacrifices. If one can't go to Whole Foods, then they can go to Key Foods, or they can check out the local pantry or community fridge to see what's being handed out. There's no shame in that, especially in a city that's charging people way too much to live in it in the first place. And that brings us to the part in our story where we look to our leaders who've sworn to fight for the average, everyday working man. That's what they campaigned on, but they still haven't gotten around to doing it for some reason. The topics we're covering today reveal that we live in a crazy world, and it doesn't help that news is coming at us 24/7 from both reputable and questionable sources. And as someone who spends hours researching current events to make these videos, I can tell you firsthand that many news outlets are just giving you their preferred version of the story. Which is why you need to know about Straight Arrow News, today's video sponsor, who helps you find fact-based, nonpartisan reporting on every topic that matters, while helping you walk through the minefield of biased reporting that is today's media landscape. Straight Arrow News lets you discover all sorts of perspectives, see the facts, and come to your own conclusions. First up, they've got the media landscape, which tells you what networks are covering a given story, and which side of the political spectrum they're on. Plus, Straight Arrow News divides opinion-based articles on the political orientation of select contributors, including prominent, sensible voices on the right and the left. On top of that, there's even a media miss tool, which highlights articles that mainstream media may have been too busy spinning their audiences to cover. But the best part is Straight Arrow News is completely free. You don't have to pay to use it, and you can use it by checking out the link in the description of this video to see what a difference journalistic integrity makes. So over here, we got your local supermarket, but there's a problem with it. Yes, it's a new store. Yes, it's experiencing a certain level of theft, which raises prices, but prices here could go up even higher because it's located south of 60th Street in New York City's new congestion zone. And every truck that comes in here to bring food to this store is going to get hit with fees. And some people think those fees are going to get rolled into the cost of food people living around here already can't afford.
But Andrew Ridgey of the New York City Hospitality Alliance reminds wholesalers don't take mass transit. Restaurants also worry the charge could create a ripple effect of costs throughout the industry.
They're concerned that now all their suppliers, where they get food and other supplies from, are all going to start charging, a congestion surcharge on their invoices.
So any business that gets deliveries is saying that if you have a big truck and that truck has to show up here and drop stuff off, since that truck can't take the subway or the bus, it's going to get hit with a fee, and that fee's unfair, and that fee is going to cause them to raise their prices. Now, I hope that they're wrong, and when I think to myself about a truck that goes to a grocery store and unloads hundreds, thousands of different items, is a $24 fee really gonna hurt the price of each item to a degree that people notice? I hope not, but experts are saying that it is. And if that ends up happening, people who've already got very few options will now have even less options, and fridges like that community fridge that's right around the corner from here will get even emptier, if that's even possible. But sadly, costs of buying food here are already high, and that's because of another problem that's also not going away anytime soon.
These men seen here on surveillance walk in one at a time as if they're not together. One of the suspects is seen talking to an employee, distracting him. He gets him to walk away. That's when a second suspect, this one in the blue hoodie, who was preparing a coffee, walks over to the freezer and starts filling up a bag.
And last year, 93% of grocery stores reported being hit by shoplifters. That's insane. And they've got the photos on the door of people who are stealing, and it might just look like one person, but when you walk around New York and you look at other grocery stores, you'll see that a lot of them have photos of people who are stealing things. They're all dealing with insane levels of theft that they then have to roll back into the cost of the products on their shelves. It's a big problem. That doesn't just raise your prices, it also makes things more difficult, because who wants to work in a place that's getting robbed constantly? It's going to be hard to find workers who want to put their lives on the line when they show up to work at a grocery store, which happens because some of these thieves are armed. And the other problem is that the more a place like this gets hit by criminals, the higher the chances are that it eventually shuts down. Now, hopefully that doesn't happen here. This store is brand new, but if other businesses shut down and this is the last business open in a building, the landlord might just charge the tenant here more rent, which means this, which is one of the last places selling $5 milk in this city, may disappear at some point or may have to raise its prices. And remember how we discussed rent being an inelastic expense and food being an elastic expense? Well, landlords, they've got an even less elastic expense than food or even rent. They've got taxes, they've got bills from the city. Now, I'm not saying we should feel bad for a greedy landlord who charges too much, but they can't escape those fees. And if they've got a whole portfolio of stores and a bunch of them shut down because they're in a high crime area, the only way they can get the money to pay their bills is from their tenants who are still surviving. That's the apartments in that building, if they have them, and any surviving store like this one. And when you realize that a grocery store has more chances of surviving in a tough high crime area than, say a boutique store that sells clothes or expensive shoes, because people need to eat and grocery stores sell the food everyone needs to survive. It kind of makes sense that prices here can go up more than most people can afford, yet the store doesn't have to shut down. Yet there doesn't seem to be a whole lot of enthusiasm for rolling back some of our decriminalization efforts here in an event to stop this.
A third suspect jumps in to help. The store manager, who did not want to go on camera, says it all happened in a matter of 2 minutes. The question many are asking themselves: why ice cream, and what are they doing with it?
Maybe they're trying to sell the ice cream. I don't know.
Yeah, nobody's eating $600 worth of ice cream. What we're looking at here is organized, opportunistic crime that results from a justice system that does not punish thievery. Over here, for example, you've got the grocery store. And then across the street right over here, we've got a little deli. Perhaps criminals could walk into that deli with a trash bag full of ice cream and say, hey, do you want to buy this? And put this on your shelves. Now, I'm not saying that that deli buys stolen food from the grocery store across the street, but this was happening at a local chain called Gristedes. And what they ended up doing was marking their ice cream. And every time it ended up getting stolen, they would go to the nearby delis and look at the bottoms of their ice cream and say, hey, wait, this is our barcode. And they knew that their stuff was winding up in the hands of competitors just down the street from them. Now look, if you're a criminal and you don't want to work a normal job in this city, it looks like there's an opportunity for you doing things that basically devalue life here for every single person. To me, that's a criminal offense. But apparently, it's not a criminal offense to our leaders who don't think those people should actually be punished or put in jail for taking things that don't belong to them. Even though not punishing that crime could lead to more stores shutting down like this one. And there are some people who say if you really want to stop crime and you want to stop stores like this, which used to be a grocery store, from going out of business, you've got to do a couple of things that we're not doing right now in New York. The first thing you've got to do is you've got to put more money back in people's pockets. You got to take away fees that make their lives more expensive than they should be. You should probably lower the amount of money that gets extracted from people's paychecks every month, which then gets wasted on programs that don't actually help people. The second thing you should do is you should put people in jail for crime. You've just made it easier and more profitable to work a normal job. So let's encourage people to work normal jobs. Let's not encourage them to pursue lives of crime, which just raise the cost of living for every single law-abiding person left in this city. What do you think about that? How would you stop New York City from experiencing food insecurity? Is this an economic problem brought about by the government, or is there something else at play? Thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next video.